We're now good to go in as far as recording is concerned. Now, if you look at this questionnaire, let's first understand what is it all about. So there's this part of introduction. And before you even go out there and you say you're starting to collect data from your respondent, you have to create an environment whereby the person giving you the data understands exactly the purpose you're going to use for that survey. What am I saying here? So there's the part of consent, of which we'll try and see how do you initiate now the whole process. Do you need to get a consent from your respondent, or you just walk in and you start asking questions? So if you look at the introduction part, it says what? National Social Security Fund has requested a consultancy firm, don't mind about the name, and the job of that consultancy firm is to carry out a customer satisfaction survey. So this is just a normal survey. And I think I mentioned yesterday, I'll start with this one, which is the customer satisfaction survey. And then there's that need assessment also survey that we will have a chance to look at. And by the time we're done with both of the questionnaire, I think you will be in a better position to really maybe even do a mock exercise on your own. So the management of NSSF will use the results of this study to effect changes that will help NSSF play her a significant role in attaining her vision. Please note that your views in form of response will be treated with confidentiality. This information is important. And the information will go a long way in assisting NSF realize her vision. So we will see how do we capture this kind of information in our server, and what is the relevance of maybe having a clear introduction before you even now dive in and start asking real questions. Now, if you look at the section, the questionnaire has several sections. So we'll try and see how are the question captured in as far as section A is concerned. In most instances, you realize the first section is more of demographic or not so sensitive questions, but is meant to now create an environment whereby the respondent is comfortable even to maybe respond to some of the questions that maybe you find they're a bit sensitive. So if you look at the way the questions are structured, you'll always start with demographic information in a questionnaire, and then now diving into the specifics objective. Because again, when you come up with a questionnaire, it is meant to serve a certain objective. Okay, and I think I mentioned that we'll a little bit we'll dive into some bit of research methodology, so that we will also understand how do you maybe arrive to that specific population. Are you doing purposive sampling or random sampling? So what are some of the sampling methods that you're going to use so that you identify again which tool goes where? If you recall, when I was introducing the different tools that are used in research, I mentioned a key informant interview guide, and I said if you have a situation whereby you're conducting a mixed method kind of research, that means you can use a questionnaire to collect quantitative analysis, and you can have a key informant interview guide maybe for the purposive sampling group. Of course, we'll have a chance to maybe discuss a bit about that. So if you look at section A of this questionnaire, the types of questions that are there are mostly what we refer to them as single selects. What do I mean there? If you go out there and you ask someone for their gender, you realize there are two options, but the respondent can only respond to one. You cannot say you're a male and then you decide again you're a female. Okay? If you go to the second question, if you look at the general details, you'll see that in age in years, you can either belong in the first group or any other group. So once you select 18 to 24, you cannot come again and say you select 45 to 54. So if you look at now this question, the one we refer to them as what? Select one or single select. Okay. Now let's look at the section B of the questionnaire. There's that part of which were your sources of awareness about NSSF. And if you look, there's some sort of instruction which says what? You're not supposed to read out the answers that are there, and it's a multiple mention. By now, you should start paying attention to the details that are in your tool, because these are now what is going to guide the whole process. So for instance, this question on awareness, you will not expect your research assistants to go out there and start preempting, because it's like they're directing the way that research should go. So that's why we will also see how do we capture information like what we are seeing here. Okay. And now, if you have a question like this, you realize that a respondent can say radio was one of the sources of awareness, and also they can still mention TV as source of awareness or about NSSF. So if you look at these questions, are the ones we call them multiple. I think you've even been told here, multiple mention, which basically means you are now giving your respondent some bit of freedom. Now you tell them, just inform us what are these platforms that that you use maybe to access information about NSSF. So we'll also have a chance to see how do you code these types of questions. Before I shift maybe gears to the next thing, if you look at the same question, there's this part of others specify. Now let me pose a question. What do you understand by this part of other specify? Anyone can try? What is the logic behind other specify, and maybe what do you think the researcher was expecting from this question? Benedict?
I think other specify means that whatever has been stated, like radio, TV, newspaper, it's not part of it. So you choose. So you say that what is not part of what has been stated above.
Okay, perfect. Remember we said in this class, no correct and wrong answers. So it's just what is in your mind. How do you envision a certain question? Somebody else wants maybe to try. How do you understand this part of other specify? And maybe if you are the person maybe conducting this survey, what is the expectation? Like, what do you think was supposed to be answered, or how was it supposed to be answered? Eden?
Thank you, Malim or George. For example, and you have asked this question to a respondent, then maybe he or she has provided several answers apart from this, or he has provided non-response from this list of answers. Then he might choose other. Then when he chooses or she chooses other, it's required to be specified. For example, and the answer should be something different from those other answers listed in this section. Thank you.
Perfect. So I think the idea is come clean, but now let me clarify what is happening here. So you realize you've been provided some items there, like the okay, unless there's someone else who raised the hand. But anyway, we'll have a chance to respond to more questions. So if you look there, there are some items that have been provided. One of them is radio. You can see newspaper. You've seen maybe if you've been referred by your employer and so forth. So these are platforms that the organization knows that their customers might use to access information about NSSF. But they are also working under the assumption that there might be other platform out there that maybe they are not aware of. I think that's the reason why even why they came up with this question, like which were your sources of awareness. So in an event that a respondent has a platform that they used to obtain information about NSSF, but it is not among the ones provided or listed there. Let's repeat that so that you digest. There are some items that have been provided, but in an event that there's a platform that is not among the ones that is listed here, then you're telling that respondent to also tell you what that platform is. So what will they do? They will click on the option of other, and they're not going to stop there. They will have now to go and specify. So for instance, if maybe Facebook was one of the platforms that maybe somebody obtained details about NSSF, then the respondent is supposed to check on this part of other, and then on specify, now they will come and write Facebook. If somebody else mentioned, for instance, LinkedIn, they will check this part of other and they will write LinkedIn. They will check the other platform and they might write Instagram. So those are three different respondents who are responding now this data specify. And what are they doing? That of a certain platform which is not among the ones listed, they are going ahead and writing the name of that platform. So these are what we refer as qualitative. I think I preempt yesterday. In an event whereby a respondent is given a blank check, whereby they can write whatever is in their mind, then that type of data is what we refer as qualitative data. The ended one, whereby you respondent choose a certain specific platform or maybe response, then we call that now quantitative, because there's that where you can also assign values, but that's not subject to this class. So how will we capture this kind of information like specify? So of course, we'll try and see if you can also use things like audio recording. If you're not doing audio recording, we'll try and see how to use things like now text and so forth. But we'll see how to do that in the server. Briefly, let me mention about mission and core values. If you look at this question, because I want us to understand the questions that are there before we even dive in and say we are now coding. If you look at this question on mission and core value, you realize that there are certain variables that they don't have specific measure. Okay, be with me here. In case you'll have a question, you'll ask me. So if you look at this question, if you want to maybe measure mission and core values for organization, you realize you have no choice but to count several attributes. If you look at this question, there are 9 attributes. Let's understand how the question is structured. How satisfied are you with the following items on mission as implemented or practiced by NSSF? So for you to understand the mission and core value, we will use 9 attributes to measure that kind of variable. So we will also have to see how will you capture all these 9 attributes to measure one variable. And now this is where things will start. We'll start having fun with it. Okay. Now let's go to the server. Let's go to the server. So in this class, I'll be using like case study. So just in picture survey for NSSF as a case study, and then maybe tomorrow or a day after tomorrow, we'll also now the need as accounting. So you see, if you had to do that, how would you have organized the whole processes? And then lastly, I will leave it as an assignment so that you will handle the third questionnaire, which was touching on the project. There's a Kilifi water hygiene and sanitation project. So as usual, we said if you go to your browser and you Google for Kobo Toolbox humanitarian response, you will be at this interface. And if you have your credentials right, which is the username and password, all you have to do is log in. Log in to your server. Now we're going to build from scratch. We're going to build our form from scratch. So there are 2 ways of, not really 2 ways, I think there are 4 ways, but let me confirm. Yeah, there are going to build from scratch. So if you just click on new, you'll see an interface like what I'm presenting at the moment. And you have an option. So at an advanced stage, you can code using Excel. I think that is a different class. You can use Excel to code form, or you can build from scratch, like what you're about to do from now. Okay. So if you go to new, click on build from scratch. Now we need to give details about that project that you're doing. If you recall yesterday, I mentioned about 2 ways of keying in the country that you have. So there's that item whereby yesterday you were asked about your country and you said Kenya. And then I also mentioned that during the time that you're doing a survey, if you're doing a survey in Mogadishu, but you are in Kigali, then it means you will write Mogadishu as the country where you're doing a survey. So this survey that I'm doing, let me just write customer satisfaction survey 2024. You can provide a brief description of maybe what survey is all about, but now this one is for your own concern, is not now the description that maybe a respondent will be able to see. So for now, let me just leave blank description. Maybe let me put it into context. Assuming you normally do these surveys maybe on a yearly basis or maybe after 5 years. So you can provide details on what that survey was supposed maybe to achieve. Because now as a data manager, you realize maybe you are the custodian of all these surveys in your server. So for now, let me just leave it blank under description because I'm specific that this survey is the 2024 one. Okay. If you find you have a better way of doing that survey, well and good. And just select me as long as it lies under the humanitarian sector. So for me, I will go for education. Provide a name for the project. Go to data, any among the. So of course, you opted yesterday. You can go by what you opted yesterday, or you can still select. So the reason why we're choosing humanitarian is because we want also to be part of the contribution. Because we said this platform was donated for humanitarian purposes, so we should be on the same page. Under country, now I'll work under the assumption that I'm doing this survey in, let me just write Kenya, because it's easier for me now to access satellite. Kenya. If you're doing this survey maybe in Somali, and I think I've already clarified that. Now you'll put here Somali so that it doesn't take long for your research assistant to access the satellite for GPS coordinates purposes. I hope that makes sense. So I'll click on create a project. Click on create a project. Just happen. So it's customer satisfaction survey 2024. I will select any of the humanitarian options that are provided there. And then under country, I'll opt for Kenya. And then I'll create project. Now, this is when I want your attention, because we will now what you call scenario analysis, so that we see what is done during the data collection process, and we make sure it's captured here. So things like making question are mandatory, even introducing skip logics. You must make sure you do a perfect job in as far as coming up with your survey is concerned. Any mistake you do here, it means that is what is going to direct the research assistants who are actually collecting data from the field. Okay. Now, I'm not going to code serial number because I mentioned we will also be able to capture this by default in the server. I'm not going to focus with the date of the interview. We'll also capture this by server. But now let's talk about introduction. So I will combine introduction as part of acknowledgement. So there are two ways of going about it. You can either have this one as variable, and if you're having it as a variable, you will realize you're not going to expect any answer. The introduction is basically basically meant to make sure we can see my screen. So if you look at this plus sign, this is how we will be adding questions. Yes, Faith?
Please repeat. You were lost for some few 1 minute there.
Okay. So what are we doing? We are building a form, and the form is just a questionnaire. So we say, just go to new, build from scratch, provide a name for that project. So I'll just call it customer satisfaction survey 2024. For description is not mandatory, optional. So if you want to describe, well and good. Under sector, just select any under the humanitarian. So this time, let me say humanitarian coordination information management. Under country, you can have Kenya, and then create a project. Aiden, talk to me.
Malino, before you proceed from here, for example, can you choose more than one country, for example, two countries in here, as well as the sector, the part that they are just putting the title is like the humanitarian and in the Department of Education, as well as another one. So, or we should only choose one part. Thank you.
That's an interesting one. I've never tried opting for more than one country, but it makes sense. You might be doing a survey in Somaliland and Somali. Let me use that for example. So I think you can use more than one country. I think, let me select Nigeria and Kenya. Yeah, and as you can see, it's accepting. So depending with what you want to achieve. So if you're doing a survey in 2 countries, then yes, you can select more than one. So thanks, Aiden, for that. I think that's a good one. As you can see, I'm also learning. So create a project. Create a project. Now, once you've created a project, I don't know, on my side it's taking longer than I expected. So there's this plus sign, which I say this is how we will be adding questions. And the first question that we're going to work with is the introduction part. We want to introduce the survey. What is this survey all about? So if you click on this plus sign, now paste that information under introduction. So just go to your questionnaire, copy the introduction part, and then come and paste under where you're seeing the blank space. So you're just doing copy pasting. Copy the introduction part and then come and paste at this blank space you're seeing here, and then go to add question. If I'm moving fast, let me know. Add question, And now we're seeing a lot of options. So by the time we're done with this class, we should be in a position to understand almost all the options that you're seeing there. Now, with introduction, I mentioned that you're not expecting any answer for that introduction purposes. And therefore, we will select the option of not. So you need to specify or now inform the software or your server that this detail that I've just provided is not a question, but instead it is a not. Willie,